Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next addition to our series on prayer and spirituality. This one is entitled, like last one, Healing Life's Hurts, but not about forgiveness per se, but healing life's hurts, healing by living the events in Jesus' life. I want to say a few preliminary things first before we get into the actual topic itself about life's hurts. Just want to talk a little bit about that. And even before I talk about that, just to talk a little bit about prayer. One of those words that we have completely lost its meaning. And I don't know how to re-establish the right meaning of prayer. Maybe it's a word that we need to find another word for. I don't know. But we're really good oftentimes at saying our prayers. Maybe as a way of God fixing something, or maybe a way of doing our duty. We say our prayers, and I've given talk after talk about prayer, and oftentimes people come to these talks about prayer because we're always looking for this magic potion, this silver bullet that somehow is going to fix our life without us having to go through it. And so we say our prayers out of some kind of a duty, or we think maybe somehow we'll stumble upon the novena or the kind of prayer that's going to fix everything for us. But what we don't do is we don't pray. And I'm going to define praying as something that has to do with your life. Praying is part of your life. It's as important to your life as the air that we breathe. And oftentimes we don't pray because we do our prayers. So praying for me is so intimately attached to our life and intimately attached to healing life's hurts. Now, last week we talked about healing life's hurts, and we talked about forgiveness. And have you noticed that life's hurts, God doesn't just take them away? That somewhere along the way, and in my experience, and experience of so many, God makes us go through our struggles, through our life hurts, as opposed to around them or just simply taking them away. And last week we talked about the 5 steps by Dr. Kubler-Ross and how she dealt with people who were terminally ill, and certainly that's a life's hurt, very much so. But it's important for all of life's hurts. And so we go through these different stages, our struggles, with all these things, from our denial, to our anger, to our bargaining, and then to our depression. And often we go through these initial parts and we struggle so much, and it seems to me that oftentimes we fall into addiction because we think it's the best way for us to be healed of our hurts. I shared a story in my homily for Sunday, which maybe you saw, maybe you didn't, but let me just share real quickly again. It's a story about Bill Wilson. And the story is about why he began to drink. Bill Wilson, by the way, is the inspiration and founder of Alcoholics Anonymous AA. And he began to drink at the age of 22 to be able to deal with the pain of not belonging, of not being accepted. Now, for me, not belonging, not being accepted, not being known, not being understood, not being loved, is pretty much the same thing. And he said the first time he drank, all of a sudden he's the life of the party. All of a sudden he felt like he belonged and he was accepted. And so he goes through the next 17 years of his life in some fashion, trying to somehow capture this experience of feeling like he's belonged or that he's accepted. And then at the age of 39, finally, on the verge of being institutionalized for chronic alcoholism, he finally gets down on his knees, or maybe he didn't get down on his knees, I really don't know, but he cries to God for help. In other words, he went through all the stages, probably denial, bargaining, anger, depression, all those different things. And finally, in a way, he begins to accept he doesn't have any power over all this. He really, the first 3 steps of AA, I can't, God can't, and I let him. And maybe finally he let God in, which he said he did. He called it a sea of the living spirit. He began to drink because it was the best way he knew to deal with his life's hurt. He stopped drinking because he found a better way and a truer way. And that's what we're about here, the better way and the truer way. Addiction is all about us trying to find a way to dealing with my life's hurt. But what happens is, in addiction, it takes us away from the real solution to it. It works at first, maybe, or the first time, but then eventually becomes an addiction. We become enslaved to the whole thing. So it really doesn't help us in the long run. We need to find that better way, that truer way, to realize that we need to accept all this and to be able to move on with our lives. Now, a friend of mine was commenting on the last video, and I have a quote from her. Here is a person who has a certain authority to speak about these things, because I think she's been through a lot. I don't want to say specifically, but been through a lot, and she sent me a text, and I want to share part of it with you about how she has learned to deal with her life's hurts. And she writes this, and this, by the way, I think is a perfect understanding of this acceptance, this final stage of the 5 steps that Kubler-Ross was talking about. She writes, but like Jesus, we also arise with our wounds. Did you get that? We arise with our wounds. Jesus had his wounds as the risen person. That's really important for us to be able to grasp. But she says, and may I say gradually, but she says, they no longer have the emotional impact they once did. That is really important. God doesn't take away our wounds. He, first of all, takes away their emotional impact from us. Then she goes on to say this, and can be experienced as freedom and transformational. It's going into our wounds that we experience the freedom and being transformed. We know it's not a one-time thing. We do it over and over and over again throughout our lives. And that's good because it keeps us grafted to Jesus. And the intimacy and union grows deeper and deeper and deeper. Those are some really profound and true words that she says to us, why Jesus makes us go through the struggle as opposed to someone just taking it away. He takes it away, we don't grow. We're not transformed, we don't become free. We still remain on the same level. He's taking us someplace further into deeper union with him. But sometimes when we go into these deep emotional hurts, it seems Jesus leaves us, or he's absent from us, or he doesn't go with us into these emotional wounds again. What this is about here today is for you and I to be able to discover a method, if I could use that word, that we're going to be able to maybe bring Jesus into our wounds and into our struggles in our prayer if it seems sometimes he is absent in the middle of it. And we're going to do that by meeting Jesus in the scriptures. That's why our title, Healing Life's Hurts, healing by living the events in Jesus' life. And let me give you an example of what I mean. In the gospel for the 3rd week of Easter, the disciples on the road to Emmaus. There the disciples are on their way to Emmaus, and the big point of all of it is that they're getting out of Jerusalem. They're getting out of Jerusalem for 2 big reasons. Number one, they're going to be the laughing stock of everybody because they hitched their wagon to the wrong person. Jesus was a dismal failure by being crucified like that, by every standard. And secondly, they thought they were next. They were going to be the next ones. I mean, mobs do that. They just keep on going, and they thought maybe they're the next ones who are going to be crucified. So they're beating it out of town. Hope torn to shreds. All of a sudden, the risen Jesus arrives, starts walking with them, and the first thing they do is they tell Jesus their struggle. That's important. We gotta tell Jesus our struggle. Then we begin to open ourselves up to him, and we allow him to show us the way to healing in the midst of our struggle. And it says their hearts burned as they listened to Jesus, and it revealed to them a whole new understanding of what he was about, his life was about, and what his mission was about as well. So that's the whole point of getting into the scriptures and finding Jesus, and maybe our hearts burn, and more importantly, being healed, our hurts being healed through this encounter with Jesus through the scriptures. Now, what I want to do now is simply offer you a simple method, and please don't never take a method of prayer too dogmatically, because you want to fashion this so it fits your world and fits your life. So don't be too dogmatic about this and worry what stage you're in. It doesn't matter that much. You kind of go up and down the ladder, once again, kind of like Lectio. And of course, you'll see some aspects of Lectio in here. You'll see some aspects of imaginative prayer in here. You'll see some aspects of even something called centering prayer in here. So, but here's a real brief explanation of a path to letting Jesus into your hurt when it seems like that he's not going with you into this emotional pain. And number one is you pick the passage. And you want to pick the passage that you want. Let's suppose you're really, really tired. Maybe John chapter 21 would be helpful. Maybe you're fearful and you're afraid and you need some courage. Matthew 14, where Jesus invites Peter to get out of the boat and walk on the water a little bit, which, by the way, he does as long as he keeps his focus on Jesus. Maybe you need to forgive someone who stung you deeply for something they have said. How about Luke chapter 23:34? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. So you pick the passage. That's number one. Just pick the one you want. And the second one, read the text. And I'm going to recommend, if you're by yourself, to read it out loud. Maybe to whisper the text, or even read it out loud if it's appropriate for you. Just read the text out loud. And read it more than once. First time you read it to understand the text. Maybe you're reading it more than one time. Second manner of reading it is to be able to be with Jesus. Be with him. And the third time you want to read the text is to let Jesus love you in the text. And the third one is you begin to focus on Jesus. And you say his name. And you can say the word Jesus, or another word if you like, Lord, Savior, friend, brother, whatever word of affection you have for Jesus. Just simply say it over gently, as one person put it, as gently as a piece of cotton falling on a pillow. Can't get more gentle than that. Say the word Jesus, or whatever word you like, over and over again. Very gently, over and over again. And if you get distracted, just go back to your word. Okay? Then the next, you want to enter into the scene. Enter the part of the scene that moves you the most. And most especially, you can use your imaginative prayer with this. Enter into all the different aspects. What's it smell like? What's it feel like? What's it sound like? What's going on there? Is it sunny? Where are you in the scene? So the idea is to enter the scene, the part that moves you the most, and most especially, enter into the scene where Jesus is and focus on him. You're still sort of got your sacred word going on in the background, but now you're using your imagination to get right in the middle of the scene, right there with Jesus, right there of the part of it that moves you the most in the scene. And then you begin to pause and you be with Jesus for a while. And if you get distracted, go back to the scene once again. What's he say to you? What's he do? How does he respond to your needs? And I could even say at this point, I would welcome you even to journal about that part if you want to after your prayer is over. But did you get all that? Pick the passage, read the text, focus on Jesus, enter the scene, and then pause to be with him. What's he say? What's he do? How does he respond to your need? And then just simply thank him for being present to you in the midst of your struggle. Now, sometimes you can have a flashback or a very deeply emotional thing happen at a certain point. Well, kind of go with that a little bit and stay with that. Don't run away from it. Don't run away from some deeply emotional thing that happens to you in that regard. Even if you're repeating the sacred word and this deeply emotional thing happens, like a flashback or some event occurs, stay there for a while with that. That'll help you in a lot of ways. That's a good sign that it's coming into your consciousness. So there's the prayer method, which once again, I don't want you to be too caught up with, that you can do to let Jesus through the scriptures enter into your hurt, enter into your struggle. And let me just offer a few suggestions of how that can work. For example, suppose healing our birth when we feel unwanted. What about pondering the text of Jesus and Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem? There's no room for them at the inn. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. Imagine how unwanted they must have felt. And maybe that's a scene that can help you to realize you're wanted, very much wanted and loved by God. Remember, as I said before, that all addiction, all of our struggles are always an attempt to somehow be able to deal with our need to belong, to be accepted, to be loved, to be known, and to be welcomed. All those things, these are the important things. And this to me is like the revolution of Christianity. That you come to know that God really does care for you. God really does love you. And as I just read the other day, one author saying that was the whole mission of Jesus. To somehow change your image of God so you could know that you are the beloved. And by the way, our message series that we're doing right now, Everyone Belongs, is all about that in some fashion. Let me give you another example. Healing through touch. We've experienced negative or unwanted touch. How about Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 48? The woman with a hemorrhage who reaches out to touch Jesus in a unique kind of a way. A positive touch, in a word of a lot of negative touches in her life. And Jesus, in the story, he has people jostling him the whole time, but he knows when he's had this kind of a touch that seeks healing, which is very different for him than the other touches he's experiencing. Or healing through a word when we've experienced nothing but hateful words. John chapter 20, verses 19 to 23. Jesus, who has just been betrayed, just been abandoned by his disciples. He goes through the locked doors. He stands before them and says, "Peace be with you." And he breathes the Holy Spirit upon them. How about healing through rest when we feel anxiety? Matthew chapter 11, verses 25 to 30. Come to me, you who are weary and find life burdensome, and I will give you rest. And he's talking to a bunch of folks who are just really beaten down by life. It's really, really hard for them. Imagine the average person in those days. And he says, come to me. He doesn't say come to God, come to somebody else, come to a prayer, come to a ritual, come to some church event. He says, come to me, you're weary and find life burdensome. How about healing through a gaze when you feel unloved and unaccepted? There's Zacchaeus, the chief tax collector, not a tax collector, the chief tax collector. Nobody was more unwanted. Nobody felt more unaccepted than a tax collector, especially a chief one. And then he climbs a tree because he's short in stature, and Jesus gazes up to him and said, Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house tonight. I got to believe that Jesus' gaze was the most remarkable thing that healed. Just his gaze healed many, many people. And then finally this, healing through the event in Jesus' life that corresponds to some event in your life, like your adolescence, like your childhood, or some other event in your life. You know, to somehow find that text in Scripture for you, that one that you want to be able to deal with all that. Share the event share the event in your life with Jesus. Share the similarities. Share the differences in the event from your event and the one in Jesus. And then share with Jesus how you feel and ask him to touch your experience. That's pretty much it. But the whole idea of this form of prayer is to let Jesus in when you feel like he is absent. He never is. He never is absent. When he seems like he's absent, you let him in. The Scriptures are a way for you to realize he's in all this with you as you struggle through life's hurts. So God bless you, folks. Thank you very much for listening to all this as we continue to struggle with these life's hurts. And maybe the next one will be similar, dealing with life hurts again, but this time healing by living the events in Jesus' life. God bless you, and hope more and more each day you and I become less and less of people who say our prayers and more people who pray.